I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Edwin Mata, co-founder of Brickin, working on STOs, bringing companies on-chain, and furthering tokenization of securities into the blockchain world. Edwin, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Ashton, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in your podcast. And obviously, it's also a pleasure to be speaking about Brickin and how we're dealing with securities and tokenization, which is a space that is growing. I mean, there's been a lot of buzz in the back and since 2016, 2017. And companies like us, we're trying to still deal with what is the concrete way to approach the space. And I think we actually hit it here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about STOs and tokenization of securities, because you're right about it going all the way back to 2016. I remember in 2018 it was supposed to be the year of security token offerings, and I think that they were probably ahead of the regulation, because there definitely was not as many token offerings as I thought there was going to be, and still it's an up and coming in part of the industry, but it really hasn't taken shape in what I expect most companies to eventually become tokenized on the blockchain. What insights do you have onto the landscape and where STOs and security tokenization sort of is at right now in 2022?
Yes, of course. I mean, let's say that the regulation per se didn't evolve, but the comprehension regarding security did. Because one of the biggest aspects was actually the governing bodies, such as the SEC, or, for example, in Europe, the Spanish SEC, the European, the French, the German. There was a lot of fear as to that the blockchain was being used to transact with securities. And that just put everything into like a situation where they were establishing that it might not be legal. But securities have been in the like just forever, no? We want to go for history. Like the first securities that were issued were in the 7th century in Japan, when the first company was ever incorporated in the world. That's crazy. So during all these 15th centuries or whatever, the knowledge as to how securities have been evolved, we went from a very verbal to a written to papyrus to paper to digital to DocuSign to kind of like, and then suddenly everything is in a token. So it's like people just lost it. So the thing is, the space has evolved more in the comprehension as to how blockchain works and how literally a token is just a mere representation of a security. So you really don't need a new regulation, because the regulation is already existing. Proof of that is, for example, MiCA regulation, which is one of the biggest now utility token regulations that is going to come out here in Europe, and it's going to go probably through a wave around the world. It's literally stating in the Article 2, when it analyzes the objectives or the objects being regulated on the such law, it says we do not deal with securities. And that's just a clue as to how everything has evolved, to say like we don't need a new security regulation. We just need for people to understand that it's just a new technology, and like digital was a technology, now we have token as a technology or blockchain. So it's just a matter that for the past 5 years, there's been a lot of ongoing communications between regulator and private companies such as myself, just to understand that, do you really need a new regulation? No, you just need to comply with what you already have, and don't go overview and pretend to be something that you're not. You're a security issuer. Perfect.
Well said, Edwin, and I agree. As long as you're complying with the current regulations, then you may not need to rewrite the whole system. And now, it seems like there can be a lot of benefits for tokenizing onto the blockchain, bringing companies on chain. If I were a startup or a well-established company and I was looking to bring my company on chain, I approached Brickin, and I didn't really know a lot about blockchain. How would you help? How do you hold your hand through this process of tokenizing and bringing the company on chain?
Just to put it into perspective, like a bunch of us with the founders and even team members now, which have grown, we come from the SaaS industry, right? And SaaS industry has been an evolution as to how we interact with digital products or communicate, in the sense that everything just becomes a click, right? So it's user experience. You don't really need to tell like people that you're gonna watch this show for an hour and then the other one is gonna come and the guy has to look. It's just click, next episode, click. That's Netflix, or here you have it signed. It's all a matter of clicks, right? So one of the main things that we have to really comprehend is the user experience or the issuer experience or the investor experience. Nobody has to know the blockchain is involved. Now that's one of the things that since we started developing this application or decentralized application is if I can make my grandma deploy a token, we're good to go. So we really went to non-technical people. I didn't talk to my grandma that I would be great. It's like, mom, it's like, maybe I'll do it. That's the next experiment. But the thing is, the beauty of this is we did talk with non-technical people and I said like, until we were able for them to do it themselves, then we really said we have a product here. So when a company comes here is we give them the technology, we give them the dashboard, simplify all those pains that you have when you want to issue a token, when you want to crowdfund, when you have to go manage your crowdfunding, your funds. All those pains are packed into a single solution. So when they come over here, we obviously tell them about reinforcing the fact that what you're doing is legal. What you're doing is according to the law. There might be some complexities, but still legal. And there might be some uncertainty, but still legal. Mm-hmm. So we provide them with the know-how that we have been building for the past 3-4 years specifically. We give them the technology, and then we provide them with the best user experience for them to deploy their own tokenization, self-crowdfund, self-do everything, because our approach is we're not an intermediary. We're not a broker. We're not an exchange. We're not in a stock market. We're nothing. We're just a tech provider who gave them all the utensils or tools for them to self-deploy. So that just also provides me with the legality that I don't specifically need any license, because in the end, I'm just a tech provider.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned some of the following steps after actually doing the tokenization. One of the things that I've been curious about is the trading of securities. And with regular utility tokens, often a project will create a token and then it's just available on the public market and anybody's able to buy it. It's sort of hard to determine which jurisdiction or who is buying those tokens. I know that I'm guessing this isn't part of Brickin per se, but there are, in the traditional finance world, the securities are traded on like the NASDAQ and more regulated exchanges. How would that work once a company has moved on chain and their securities are tokenized in terms of trading them or getting them to the right investors and people speculating on them?
Yes, of course. I mean, what you're establishing is kind of like you already have a full-on market, right? So the creation of those markets need to be regulated. Actually, here in Europe, they're about to deploy what is called the pilot regime for creating the first stock markets that can use DLT technology. So what I'm trying to say here is there are different games, right? I mean, a company, when they want to go mass public, let's call it like that, they go through an IPO procedure. But the first 10 steps, which is the pre-seed, the seed, the A, B, C, whatever, until they reach that IPO, is still private markets. Mm-hmm. So tokenization has two different layers. One is hitting the private markets, kind of like at the private sector, where when I can go to you and say, Ashton, why don't you invest in my company? You're my friend. Fine, I'll put you in my cap table. You're good to go. That's kind of like the private market. When you go to the public markets, you usually buy the shares through a broker. So you really don't have the maintenance or the holding of the shares. It's a third party. It's a different game because actually as a shareholder, you're really not a shareholder. The broker is who's representing you through their interest, right? I mean, that's I'm not going against it. I'm just saying that's the game. But it's a different game. So tokenization right now, it's trying to understand where it's going to boom. Is it going to boom at that level where they're going to compete against NASDAQ, where they're going to regulate it, and then it's a broker and everything? I don't believe per se, now this is more utopia-like, I don't believe that's decentralized, because in the end, you do have a broker, and again, you do not have the shares. And that's just a public market using blockchain technology to be more optimized, transparent, and whatnot. That's fine. Cost characteristics and bad. But at the private markets, this is where it becomes truly interest. And this is the war we're hitting, where you might not be as liquid with all those huge order books and liquidity and market makers, because that's already a huge market. But you can create a market that it's private. So if Ashton wants to sell on a P2P market, P2P markets are legal and you don't need a license, you can do it. And the legality in the back is that the issuer needs to be compliant with AML procedures and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs to accept that the buyer has a KYC and the seller has a KYC. It's not as liquid as a full-on market, but to create that market, that's why there's only one public market per country. So you have Nasdaq, or you have the Paris Exchange, or the London Stock Exchange, but you don't have a second market in those countries, right?
Mm-hmm. Great to know. And speaking of multiple countries and the differences maybe in the regulation between the NASDAQ and the London Stock Exchange, or just in those countries for securities, with you working in Europe, is there a major difference in being able to onboard companies that start in America to the Brickin platform versus in Europe? And are you able to do both?
No, I mean you can do both, but there's always especially in securities, there's a part that it's uncodable. So for example, you registering before the SEC in the United States for the issuance of the security. That's still something that I cannot code, or nobody can, because it's a subjective matter. You have to fill in your white paper and your audits and your I-forms and whatever. So that's until, I don't know when, if it's going to be possible. So what we have built here, for example, in Brickin, it's an expert ecosystem. We have law firms working with us for tokenization in the United States. So I provide the tech as the first layer, let's say. And then whatever is missing due to the specific regulation in that country, we already have partners. So if the company in the United States wants to, let's say, use the technology to issue in the United States, we give them the tech and we connect them with the law firms ecosystem that we have in the United States, and they can pick, according to their needs or federal, state, or whatever, their own law firm. And that happens very much in all the countries. So for the past 2 years, I've been closing law firms in various countries because I want them to give the tech, and whatever specialty that country might have that I cannot code, then it goes because it's a subjective matter. So it's a lawyer drafting some document, or as simple as that. For example, here in Spain, you just have to send an email with some certain information and you're good to go. So, but that email, I cannot draft it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And, working on this for the past few years, how far along is Brickin compared to, where you need to be to ensure that security tokenization is more prominent in, at least in the blockchain space? I feel like it's still very small compared to where it needs to be.
Oh, completely. I mean, we started our journey, let's say, more from an education type of perspective, where we studied the market 2019. It was still a buzzword. In Spain, specifically, very few STOs. United States had a big competitor. When you enter there, zero liquidity. So it was. I do remember a metric, and I can give it to you. It's stock markets, one of the biggest, let's say, aggregators from STOs in the world. They established that last year, they finished June around 1 billion market cap. 1 billion is ridiculous when you're talking about crypto market. I mean, we hit 3 trillion. And if we're not talking about all the private, it's kind of like, it's just a single dot in the space. Mm-hmm. But the big but here comes, and this is what is for me mind blown. We restudy what is the market. And if you go today, I think you will notice that the number, it's around 19 billion. 1 year we did a times 18 of the total capitalization of a market. So that's just ridiculous. So that's just a pinpoint as to how the markets are reacting to securities. And then if you read the news, obviously I come from blockchain, but I chill with corporate and institutionals and the government, the regulatory. It's just one big ecosystem. You cannot neglect anything. But I do read the news a lot. And I understand that banks are trying to establish what is they're creating digital assets infrastructure. They're hiring a lot of people in the tokenization space. They're connecting with tokenization platforms. I'm talking with banks. So it's kind of like, if you will ask me, when are we going to boom? right now we're on the early stages, kind of like that propeller when you have the spaceship and it's like that first part. 2 years from now, I think it's going to be quite interesting for the tokenization space as a whole.
Wow, that's very exciting and great growth numbers there. And now you're poised for growth in this next 3 years and beyond. I saw that Brickin recently just closed a fundraising amount. Can you talk about that and the next steps on where that capital is going to go to ensure the maximum growth for these next few years?
Of course. We are going towards, we did our community round. So we already had a vast community before we launched our ICO. And we raised 2 million through them. We're right now in our strategic round, closing some VCs. That was the second phase. And then we're going to go for 2 more public rounds. And in the back, this is one of the biggest milestones. And it's the 2 million, yes, it's money. But actually, one of the biggest milestones that I believe is we got a grant from the Spanish government for 325K. And we literally told them we're a crypto company, we're doing STOs, we want to tokenize assets, and they gave it to us. So that let's say now my firepower is at 2.5 mil, and where it's going is actually one of the biggest things that matters for a company, is because once you spend €1, it's not going back, right? Yeah. So we did a big growth. We created the company as an organism, kind of like we thought about all the departments, all the different needs. We already put into a big chunk that I don't have it here, but it's kind of like just one big organism where we have all the departments and all the needs. And we established that for us to grow and scale and penetrate different kind of markets and put ourselves into a brand, we need this profile, this profile, this profile, this profile. So last year we finished with 9 people on the team, and this year we're 25. And next year, if I can raise the strategic and the public rounds, we really want to times 2. And why? Because we need to be quick. 2 years, it's little time, in the sense that when a competitor enters in 2 years because they heard tokenization just boom, there's no space. Right now we're in bear market. When the competitors try to raise money because they thought about raising money in 2023, money funds are going to be complicated, especially now in a space where there's big players out there or capitalized players like myself. So for me right now, the strategic round is to really go for the spaceship. There's no little growth. There's no medium growth. I love that mentality in America where there's like everybody just goes for the moon. And here in Europe, the mentality is like, give me money to survive. But here in Brickin, we have acknowledged that money has to be, I want to take the space. There's a big space. Let's go for it.
Very exciting. Looking forward to that. And I definitely expect new entrants in the space as well. So best of luck when that happens. And really, as you mentioned, because the market cap of this is like $1 billion and now 18 billion, still so small, even just compared to Bitcoin, which is so small compared to the stock market, there is a lot of room for growth. And the portrayal from a lot of blockchain companies I hear is that they expect other blockchains and companies sort of work together for one common vision, in that it's so small that if it's going to get anywhere near the size of the equities market, they're going to need to work together to help grow this space and sort of make it more prominent to bring it up.
Completely agree. I mean, we're even sensing, not just from the, one thing I like about the blockchain space is there's not so many competitors. I come from a SaaS, like I said, and the space was a little bit dirty in the sense like competitor was trying to kill other competitors. This space is, we're all growing and we're all just a few, for example, in Spain, we're like 3 companies in the tokenization space. That's ridiculous. Okay, the market cap is not there to be like 20, but still ridiculous. And what I wanted to say is there's still collaboration, truce, there's like, let's build together. We know that we have many competitors, but it's not us. It's the public's point of perspective. If the STOs are correctly done, is the SEC looking for us in the are you doing the performance of an STO correctly, or your clients and whatnot? So that thing is collaboration. And now I would like to add, there's another collaboration happening, and it's regulatory organisms are actually approaching these kind of initiatives, not just tokenization. They're like the metaverse, NFTs. I mean, they're really subsidizing these kind of initiatives, or they're even deploying sandbox environments where private companies can go and perform kind of a project alongside with a regulatory organism. So I think that's really what is happening in the space. It's like we see the news and it's like, oh, the government is killing everything. Yeah, it's their job in the sense they have to take care of things. I mean, don't expect them to just boom, because problems happen. Luna happened, and Luna is teaching us a lot. I mean, if you want to see that everybody can just perform an ICO and then a second one and third one probably in the coming months, that's crazy. There's regulation that needs to happen, but at least, obviously, it's super slow. Not gonna lie, everybody would like to go as fast as innovation, but at least the first approaches are occurring. United States about to deploy a sandbox. That's also gonna be massive. So there's collaborations in the space. Maybe should be more, but at least we're not independently trying to do our own thing.
Mm-hmm. Well said, and I'm looking forward to that sandbox. And for, there's almost every company in the world that isn't yet tokenized or hasn't been put on chain, but they're interested in learning about the benefits of security tokenization and how they can do it. Do they just approach Brickin, or what is the best way to go about that?
Yeah, no, they can look us on obviously on many social media, on the website www.brickin.com, and we can highly jump on a demo and then help them tailor-made what are the requirements. And other people say, like, I have equity, what will I tokenize? And it's like, yeah, bring your equity online. Let's see how that happens, because you have a document that is signed by your table in a cap table, but it's static. There's no movement to it. So bringing on chain and putting life to something that is in an ecosystem already flooding out there, there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, early stages tokenization, yes, but I'm already looking into DeFi protocols where we can establish that the share has a value because it's backed by a real asset. And you can probably collateralize that. You can probably loan it. You can probably lend it. You can probably play with a lot of systems that right now, who knows what's going to happen. But at least I know that in shares and in paper, put it on the drawer and forget about it. That's it. That's why people raise money every 6 months or every 18 months or whatever, because they don't know how to move that. But if you put life, well, maybe everything can be changed,
Very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing the growth of Brickin's platform and just security tokenization overall. I will leave the link to the platform in the description box below for the viewers as well, to make it easy. Thank you for your insights into everything securities and tokenization, Edwin. All the best with Brickin moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, it's been a pleasure of a conversation. Thank you very much.